There are 472 days until the 2027 Women's World Cup in Brazil. U.S. Women's National Team head coach Emma Hayes has just 6 official FIFA windows to write down her squad for that tournament. And with the 2026 SheBelieves Cup behind us, we thought it would be a good time to update our own full-time U.S. Women's National Team roster predictions ahead of the World Cup. We are getting out our crystal balls, our performance charts, and our hot takes as we look ahead to Brazil. Alongside me delivering those picks for the 23-player roster will be Melanie Anzidei and Tamerra Griffin. And we are back. I am joined now by the dynamic duo, the Athletics, Melanie Anzidei and Tamerra Griffin. Hello, you both.
Hello. I feel like
Hello.
we've all just recently seen each other because we're doing a million things all the time, but it's always a pleasure to jump on the pod with both of you.
Isn't
Always
it the
a pleasure to
best?
be here.
It's our daily hangout. Okay, but it's our first hangout since post SheBelieves Cup. So let's give our kind of post-mortem final thoughts as we say goodbye to the SheBelieves Cup 2026 that saw the U.S. Women's National Team return to glory. Tamerra.
I need to get something off of my chest.
Please do.
I've probably already done so with Melanie, if not also Theo, but for the rest of our listeners, it's really important for me to note no disrespect whatsoever to Alyssa Thompson for winning SheBelieves Cup MVP. Her goal against Colombia that sealed her victory was not only a golazo, highlight reel material, we'll never forget it, but having watched all 3 games and considering that SheBelieves is a round-robin style tournament, which meant that the game against Colombia wasn't exactly a final, I just think that I need to give my flowers to 2 other players that I thought were stellar across all the games that they played in SheBelieves and should have also been, I hope that they were also considered MVP candidates. The younger Thompson, Giselle, I thought she was fantastic for 2 full 90s against Argentina and Canada. And Jaden Shaw, who had a goal and an assist in both the Argentina game, and she assisted Alyssa Thompson's game-winning goal against Colombia. So excellent tournament, so much to unpack, much of which Melanie and I have already done in our writing, which everyone should be reading at The Athletic. But those are 2 players that had MVP performances for me, and they deserve their flowers. That's all I have to say about that.
The Tamerra Griffin, SheBelieves MVPs. I like to see it, but I would say probably that was just being a prisoner of the moment. Okay, Melanie, how do you say goodbye to the SheBelieves Cup?
Oof. I will just say, I'm thinking back. So I was there in person for Harrison, and just the energy of that Colombia-America game, I loved it. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to live in it for forever. I just loved anything that was happening. So that's how I'm going to remember it. But also, I will say from reflecting on all of this, I love seeing how Emma Hayes and this team was able to capitalize on the team's depth. I think we finally seen a manager who's able to do that. And I think that's something that's going to stick with me. And I'm very, very excited to see how that, plays out, especially as we look ahead to the World Cup.
The perfect transition.
Look at
that.
that.
Is
She's coming for your transition job, Theo.
What we are doing today. Melanie and Tamerra have had some homework. They have with them their official 23-player squads for the 2027 World Cup kicking off next June. So here's the breakdown and how we are doing it. We're going to go position by position, and Tamerra and Melanie are going to explain it all to us. Get into the nitty-gritty, but really focus on 3 categories. And that is lock, which means definitely going to Brazil. Pack your bags, buy your ticket. Nothing performance-related could stop them from being in Hayes' squad. And then the middle one is trending in. So that is confident that this player is going to Brazil, but there could still be a fallout if the trajectory changes. And last one on the bubble. So for now, could not be there, vulnerable to change, roster spot in doubt and uncertain. So before we get into your rosters, I also want to know what kind of roster projection this is. So before we dive in, can each of you take me into your methodology, Tamerra?
Yeah, this is sometimes just as, if not more challenging to articulate than picking the players themselves, because there are so many variables and the variables change almost day to day. I tried to keep my methodology consistent from 1.0. I think the most important thing for me, which is probably pretty controversial, is the question of availability.
I
I
know.
and I'm
It's such a buzzkill, availability.
and I think for me, and this might just be the way my brain works, it's really difficult, essentially impossible, to project the health and availability of a player that you've not been able to watch in a very long time for whatever the reason, whether it's long-term injury, whether it's maternity leave, mental health leave, it doesn't matter. If I have not been able to watch you play for club, let alone country, in an extended period of time, with Emma Hayes, the way Emma Hayes has been building this roster, to your point, Melanie, about depth, my math can't math. Like, I can't project the way a player is going to perform compared to a player that I am able to see day in and day out. So for me, in almost every single case, if I've not seen a player selected to the U.S. Women's National
Mhm.
Team for, yes, an arbitrarily long period of time, undefined,
Mhm.
I'm not going to consider them for the roster. I want to wait until I'm able to see them. So I think that's my most important methodology. Everything else I think is kind of intuitive, but I'm curious how Melanie approached this.
That's fair. So yours is very much centered on making the best decisions based on who's available now.
Yeah,
Got it. I think that's very fair.
it feels fair. But when you start naming names,
I
that's when it
know.
gets a little complicated for people, just saying.
Yeah.
Melanie?
I will say similarly, I also a little caveat. So similar thinking as Tamerra, where I thought of the players that are available now, like actually available to get on a plane. Like the club will release them if Emma Hayes calls them. So there's some questions around certain players that I think are considered locks, I would say, for 2027, who aren't on my roster because we just genuinely don't know what's going on with them right now because they're not appearing for club. They're not. So it doesn't mean that they have a long-term injury. They have this long-term absence. It's just I am going with this idea of if they can get on a plane tomorrow. And so that does include in my roster certain people we haven't seen in a long time. Maybe we've seen very limited, clips on social media that they're in training now. And maybe a little more wishful thinking on my part because of that. Um, but again, it does really, like when you start naming names and when you start thinking behind like every specific player and the logic behind it, I think that's when this conversation gets a little more, I guess, reveals more of how I thought about their availability. But I do think that's like the main thing when it comes to my methodology was that.
Yeah, you're both being incredibly pragmatic and informed. And
Rare
doing your
form for
your
me.
your your
Yeah.
due diligence. It's very scientific. Full disclosure to our listeners, our rule here on Full Time was everyone's available. So throw those long-term injuries out the window. For Brazil, everyone is fit and healthy. Okay, let's start up top, or all the way in the back, I shall say. With the goalkeepers, you two had identical goalkeepers with the three in Fallon Tullis-Joyce, Claudia Dickey, and Mandy McGlynn. Before we move into the defenders, what do we want to say about these goalkeepers?
It's kind of funny to me that between the moment of Alyssa Nair's retirement and now, we've gone pretty quickly from who's the next number one going to be to completely identical picks between these three. And I would
Mhm.
say, I don't know if you agree with this, Melanie, like in the
Mhm.
order that you even read the names, Jill, in terms of number one, number
That's
two,
their
number
ranking.
three. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even that feels pretty clear and unanimous. It's not
Mhm.
often that we see other goalkeepers even getting called into national team camp. I know there are some like Jordan Silkowitz who was there in January, but this one is blessedly because it was actually nice to not have to think too hard about this one. I think the performances speak for themselves. Fallon Tullis-Joyce with her second consecutive shutout in that Colombia game, and She Believes, obviously an incredible form in Manchester United. I think Claudia Dickey makes a lot of sense as the number two based on her She Believes Cup performances. Obviously, NWSL season starting next. Yeah, this one was the most like no-brainer of the four positions for me.
Yeah. I will say also that I feel like the She Believes Cup also made it more clear that it might also be Emma Hayes thinking, right? With Fallon appearing twice, obviously with Fallon, we had that recent injury that kind of saw
Yeah.
her sideline and kind of kept her from a recent camp. So maybe if that hadn't happened, we'd have a clearer picture sooner of kind of where the depth chart is for the goalies.
Mhm.
So yeah, it feels very easy to kind of name these three. But I will say I am going to be paying attention to some goalkeepers in 2026.
I
I'm
know
very
which
intrigued.
ones.
I know. Well, I will say, Jersey girl with the Jersey theme of being in Harrison this past weekend, like Casey Murphy. I'm just very curious how she's going to do. Going to an expansion side in Boston Legacy, like what does that mean for her?
Mhm.
And also Emma Hayes has said that, she's going to be paying
Mm.
close attention. And I know we'll get into it later, but it really can be like day and night where a player goes from not being considered in a roster to all of a sudden being a sure lock-in for the 2027 World Cup. So right now I'm dead set on this, but I'm curious to see how it changes.
Something we see often in the men's and the women's game at the
Hmm.
goalkeeper position. Okay, so before we move on, just goalkeepers we're keeping our eyes on outside of these top three are Casey Murphy, Jordan Silkowitz. Anyone else want to shout out before we move on?
I was really gunning for Aubrey Kingsbury prior
Mm-hmm.
to her announcement that she
Mm-hmm.
is pregnant, because I think I've said this on the pod before. I like the idea of bringing like a real capital V veteran goalkeeper to the World Cup, but that's null and void now. But shout out to Audrey anyway. Aubrey.
All right, time now to shout out the defenders between Tamerra and Melanie's 7. 6 are identical in Naomi Girma, Emily Sonnet, Emily Fox, Avery Patterson, Tara Rudd, and Lily Reel. Tamerra, you had Giselle Thompson of Angel City, while Melanie, you have Tierna Davidson of Gotham FC. Why, Melanie?
Well, again, with the mentality of, she's available now. So
Yes.
I have a lot of faith in Tierna. I think that Emma Hayes has been speaking very openly about her excitement for this player to return. I don't think she's a player that hasn't been training. I don't think she's not able to have, a full 90 minutes potentially. I just think we just haven't seen it, just the
Mm.
nature of an ACL recovery, what that means. Um, and I don't know, she just brings like a veteran leadership to her that I think even without having availability or minutes, I think it's just someone who I think brings so much more to a World Cup roster in addition to her already immaculate game and immaculate ability and she also has so much relationship with the Gotham players. And I think that's something that's going to translate throughout the year that I think is important, especially as Emma focuses and talks a lot more about, these relationship building things and exercises with having players on the pitch. So no matter who she brings on, she knows that they're going to have this like relationship that already exists. So that's why I want Tierna.
A veteran for sure at 27 years old. Okay, the difference here being an extra center back versus an extra fullback. Tamerra, why was Giselle Thompson able to grab one of those last spots for you?
100% she believes recency
Mm.
bias. As I mentioned earlier, I already gave Giselle her flowers for her performances in those 2 games against
That's right. She got the Tamerra Griffin. She believes
the Tamerra
MVP.
bouquet.
Yes.
I thought she was phenomenal, and those 2 games for me really felt like a culmination of a lot of behind the scenes work that she clearly has done. I think in terms of choosing Giselle over any other player, including Tierna, who I will say I think is also from like a U.S. soccer perspective very much considered a lock, if not trending, if healthy. I think that reflects even your opinion too, Melanie. I think for me, I was listening to a clip. I didn't listen to the full episode, but Lynn Biondolo, sorry, I haven't had my coffee yet, said on a
I think
podcast.
knowing her like a titch, she'd be fine with both.
Sorry, Lynn. But she said something when she was chatting with Sam Ewis on a podcast about the way she recalls Emma Hayes speaking about Tierna Davidson back when they were all in camp together. And she made a comment about Tierna's ability to basically penetrate into the attack with her distribution from the back and how unique of a gift that is and a skill. I kind of think that Tara Rudd is stepping into that space in terms of what she brings to the team. And so it's not to say that they're a like for like swap, but I do think that Tara Rudd, in addition to her forward distribution, being formerly a forward herself, offers a lot of what I think Tierna does. Obviously, Tierna has her own skill set that Tara does not, and vice versa outside of that. But I just think that 3 center backs, if you're bringing 7, is sufficient. And considering the way that I've seen Hayes employing these fullbacks, I'm just imagining them getting tired. And so having maybe a little bit more depth in those outside positions seems like a smart move potentially. And I think given who's all available right now for me, Giselle is prime for that spot. I know we'll get into the categories later, but that's sort of my thinking behind that.
I also agree that Giselle is one of those players who brings a lot to this roster, especially watching her at this SheBelieves Cup. I mean, she would be the player that I would have instead of, Tierna in my lineup. They were the two that I was kind of going back and forth with. But with Giselle, it's just also that relationship that she has with Alyssa, not just because they're sisters. Like I do know, and I did see through Emma that was something that she was focusing on. For me, with Giselle, it was just how important it was for Emma that she had 90 minutes of playing time in this tournament. Kind of, to me, made it feel like that she has stuff to work on. So right now, that's why, like, when you're choosing between the two, I went with Tierna. But, I do think Giselle is one of those players who I think, trending towards being in this roster. And again, we never know what's going to happen, who's going to be available, who gets an injury. So, and her versatility and her ability to play, like, the position she does is just such a refreshing thing to have on a roster.
I know. Can you really take one without the other? Not to get like emotional here, but it would just feel wrong. Okay. Before we get into the attackers, though, are we all in agreement that the locks at defense would be Naomi Girma, Emily Sonnet, Emily Fox, and
Avery Patterson for
Avery
me
Patterson?
is
Okay.
like, if there were a category in between lock and trending in.
There's not.
I know, but if we're to imagine those two things as like a spectrum, I love a spectrum.
Yeah.
Avery is still closer to lock than trending in for me, put it that way. The fact that she was called in to this, SheBelieves, as a replacement player says a lot. And I think sort of speaks to the spectrum that I sort of illustrated. But she's a near lock for me.
Yeah, I also agree. Her versatility, just her ability to know so many different positions, again, in a World Cup is just so important.
I wonder if Emma Hayes feels the same. All right, let's move on to the midfield. Just like the goalkeepers, you two were absolutely identical in this one. Of our 7 midfielders, you had Sam Coffey, Claire Hutton, Lily Johannes, Lindsay Heaps, Jaden Shaw, Rose Lavelle, and Olivia Moultrie.
To me, this is another sort of irony because to me, it sort of feels like between like 2023 and 2024 and now, there was collective high-level concern about the state of the U.S. Women's National Team midfield. You guys remember when people are like, what's going on with this position? And yet again, similar to the goalkeepers, here we are unanimously selecting players that we think are, and I feel like when you have when it looks identical like this, that also sort of leans heavily into who's locks, if there's not much to debate. So I think that speaks very highly to Hayes' development of that position, given the suffering that I think some of us have had watching this team in the past in that region of the pitch. But Melanie, of course, we have to talk about Jaden Shaw because for me, compared to the 1.0 roster, Jaden is replacing Croy Bethune. But there's so much more to say about it goes way beyond replacing a player. And really, I think we just need to focus on the Jaden Shaw like renaissance of it all.
Absolutely. I mean, looking back at the 1.0 roster that you and Meg had done in not that long ago in the fall.
Yeah, just in October.
Jaden Shaw was not on it. And at the time, that made complete sense, because she was someone who was like, just in this slump playing on a team or not playing for a team that, you thought that we see more minutes of. And then in like just the transition to Gotham, it was like, where would she fit in this team that has so much of like attack? But she was able to just so smoothly fit into that, and just how she used the development from the U23 to the senior team and that flow, how that was able, I think it just speaks to the madness that is Emma Hayes and her ability to know exactly what these players need. And Jaden Shaw, for me, would be a lock for 2027. The way she's playing, the way she's able to just come in as a starter, as, late in the game and really be one of those change makers, which we saw, again, like you said, potential MVP for the She Believes if it hadn't been for Alyssa Thompson's goal. So I just think that's something that to me, and also speaks to the fluidity of it all. Like anything can
Mhm.
change any moment. So Croy Bethune, I would say, a potential on the bubble player for me.
If there was a number 8, would it be Croy Bethune?
I think so. I think so.
I would say also I'm keeping my eye on her because of her decision to leave the Spirit and to
Mm.
go to Kansas City Current. I think we're going to be seeing a lot from her, and I really feel that decision was with this exact concern in mind. Knowing how much depth there is in the midfield, knowing that she has to improve certain things, and I think she went there for a reason. And I think we're going to see a lot from Croy this season. That's going to be specifically for this.
Yeah, I also think it helps that she has big tournament experience,
Yeah.
going with the U.S. to the Olympics in 2024. We
Hmm.
haven't even really gotten to, like, that side of things. We're talking mostly about sporting, which we should. But I
Hmm.
think even having the experience, which actually came up a lot during the She Believes tournament, tournament experience, I heard used a lot from Hayes and a lot of the players, getting used to playing a game, traveling that night or first thing the next morning, training, playing another game, basically, is a skill itself that you ideally are not throwing a player into that kind of frying pan for the first time when you get to Brazil in 2027. So I think that for Croy, even things like that can be a factor.
One player before we move on to the forwards, who's your biggest bubble player of these midfielders?
Ooh.
Can I
Hmm.
say for me, it was Olivia Moultrie?
Mm.
Um, just because just because everyone else is such a lock, just like process of elimination for me. Not to say that I don't think she will be there in 2027, but when I look at, again, just speaking to the talent and the level of skill that is now in this midfield that we just, it's just so hard to choose. It's just one of those positions that we have so much availability for.
Yeah. I wanna, you know how sometimes in class when the teacher wants to call on you you don't know the answer, so you're kinda like, I feel
And that
compelled
could
to.
be I feel like that can be an answer here.
Oh,
Yeah.
great,
That
okay. I'm
yeah.
avoiding eye contact so that I don't get called on to answer this
No,
question.
but that is
It's
that
so tough.
but I think that's really cool. I think that's exciting, to think that this is the midfield, shall we say. Okay, now to the spicy part, the forwards. We are bringing 6 to Brazil in 2027, and you guys were identical in all but one of your selections. Here is where you were alike: Emma Sears, Jamise Joseph, Trinity Rodman, Ali Setnor, and Alyssa Thompson. But Tamerra, you have Kat Macario, while Melanie, you have Sophia Wilson, who did just make her return in a friendly for the Portland Thorns after having a baby. So, Melanie, why are you taking Sophia and no Kat Macario? I think when you gave us your methodology, I have a sense of where this is going. Availability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll start off wishful thinking with Sophia Wilson. We don't
Mm,
know how she's going to be when she's back on the pitch for a full 90, but the fact that she's back on the pitch for me is kind of the reason why I kept her in this instead of a Kat Macario. Kat Macario hasn't played since December. We haven't seen much of her. Um,
mm,
do I think she's unavailable, unfit? No, but we do know that she is injured, just from what we've heard. That's why she wasn't in this camp, not because she wasn't available. So that's mostly the thinking for me. And I think I had to have these strict rules for me because of how hard it was to decide these. I was pacing back and forth, putting people in, taking them out. It just became I needed to do some parameter to limit myself
You
to,
do.
because otherwise it's just you're just constantly like changing it, revising it, putting in people who,
Oh,
so that's
I
kind
was
of
so
why.
thankful that I wasn't assigned to do this because I would have had a 53 player roster. So I'd be like,
right.
but you're coming to Brazil and you're coming to Brazil, but I love you.
Truly.
Okay. Um, Tamerra, despite all of that, again, in our perfect world, everybody is available. You are bringing Kat Macario.
Yeah. Um, yes, we're in March. Yes, the last time we saw Kat in competition was December. It's been almost 3 months, a little over 3 months at this point. But I really want to give her the benefit of the doubt based on her performance in 2025 with the U.S. Women's National Team. The fact that she was the top goal scorer is huge. Of course, yes, in the absence of Sophia Wilson, Mallory Swanson, and Trinity Rodman at times due to her absence to address her back issues. But that is not a player. That's a player that, for me, has a high threshold of leaving off the roster altogether. And she's essentially my one exception, I guess, when it comes to my availability methodology. So it's kind of funny that Melanie and I both sort of had the same methodology, but bent the rule in different ways for different players. But this is our podcast. Exactly. Yeah, and there's also a part of me, I'm like a romantic when it comes to
Is it the Brazil connection
game.
that like...
Not even that, but this sort of explains why I have not yet named Sophia Wilson to either my 1.0 or 2.0 rosters. Is I'm getting a little bit more into like the philosophy of it all now, but I think for certain players like Sophia Wilson, what they bring to a team, what they can contribute to a game, the way that they can pull moments out of almost nowhere and put a game on its head is so generational, so special, so important that I personally, as the architect of these 1.0, 2.0 rosters, want the satisfaction myself of being able to put her name on my roster after she has gotten to a place where it makes sense to have that in the conversation. I guess I feel kind of weird about allowing the name of a player to like justify putting them on a roster. And sometimes I wonder if even the players would want that necessarily. Like, I want to be able to see her performance post having a baby and like feel that, after she's scored a hat trick in her first, regular season game back or whatever. I kind of want that moment. So I'm waiting for that too. But
you didn't pick her.
That's why I didn't pick her. I'm waiting for
it's
like
our cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I want to see that too. I want to see both things, but I also want to see Kat Macario, who was born and basically raised in Brazil and came to the U.S. to be able to play alongside girls, kind of return on a women's national team squad. So there's just but I also want to see Sophia Wilson have that return, just like I want to see everybody who has had to step away to build a family do. So I want to see both, but I don't know who I'd lose to bring them both. But they'd be on my 54 player roster that I would be building. All right, before we say goodbye, I just have to ask you both. No Mal Swanson?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not yet.
Swanson.
Similar kind of
Tough.
stance for me as Sophia Wilson. Melanie and I learned at NWSL Media Day back in January that she, in terms of timeline, is a bit further back than Sophia Wilson, which makes total sense. And I just really believe in like respecting the time a player needs to get back onto the pitch for really whatever reason. But I will be more than happy to pen her name in, Soph's name in, anyone's name in between now and whenever we do 3.0. And I do think that for me, if Sophia Wilson becomes available and makes her way onto my roster, the player that I see her bumping out is probably... I think I would still keep Jamise, and she would be bumping off Ali Sentnor for me, which is probably also spicy.
Yeah,
but do we need to talk about Jamise Joseph? Because
let's give her a moment, because SheBelieves Cup, these are a lot of names that we would have written down, but not Jamise Joseph, perhaps.
I will say, maybe Tamerra, you want to go, because when I think of Jamise, I think of the one words for the NWSL. I think of what you said. You're just last year when you spoke about on the pod with the NWSL teams what they need to do next year, you spoke about Chicago needs to lean in on Jamise, and we've seen that with the U.S. Women's National Team, and I do think Emma spoke about, she even said, like, I was just so impressed with Jamise, so she's here. you know? And I was also impressed. You know, she didn't play much in that game against Colombia, but when she was in there, she created an opportunity. And I think that speaks to, you know, her ability to come on the pitch, make a difference, like play her role in a meaningful way. And I know, Tamerra, you probably have a lot more to say.
Yeah. I mean, some people would argue that her goal in the first game against
Mhm.
Argentina should have been a goal. That she, in fact, was
Mhm.
onside. So even the fact that she made that kind of impact with, as we've said, relatively limited minutes compared to other players, I think says a lot. For me, the biggest strength of Jamice's that would keep her on the roster for me over someone like Ali Sentnor, especially if Sophia Wilson or Kat Macario is available to play the 9, is the fact that for club, at least, Jamice can also be a major threat on the wing. She hasn't done that much with the U.S. Women's National Team, and I think Emma Hayes has been pretty clear that she sees her playing the 9 role. But when I'm thinking about the demands of a tournament, versatility is invaluable. And that's a position that I think Jamice could comfortably play if needed in the midst of a tournament if, you know, things are needing to be shifted around over someone like an Ali Sentnor. And she has the same sort of hold-up play, the same ability to drive up players 1v1 that you need in a 9. So that's what gives her the edge for me. Of course, you know, she hasn't had as much time to build chemistry with the rest of the U.S. Women's National Team players because she only earned her first call up late last year. But the fact that she has been consistently called up since, I think, says a lot. And as we continue to move forward and assess the availability of other U.S. Women's National Team 9s, I think we're going to be coming back to this sort of triangle, if not like quad, of Kat Macario potentially as a 9, Soph Wilson, Ali Sentnor, and Jamice Joseph. So we'll probably be coming back here at some point.
Oh, we sure
For
will.
sure.
We have a lot of point O's to come. So there you have it. There are our full-time U.S. Women's National Team World Cup 2027 rosters. Today, the 2.0. Keep your eyes out for a 3.0. That'll be coming in the next 3 to 6 months or so. But that does it for today. Tamerra and Melanie, thank you both. All right, time now to bring in writer Jacob Whitehead, who's been covering the story about the Iranian national team, but the latest being the fact that 5 Iranian players have defected following the Asian Cup in Australia. What's the latest and what can you tell us?
Yeah, so this literally occurred about 8 hours ago as we speak now on, it's Monday afternoon UK time. It happened on Monday evening in Australia. This has been building for a little while. So obviously last week, the Iranian team didn't sing the anthem after their first game of the Asian Cup. And that went down very badly in Iran, and it was seen as a protest against the regime. State TV called them traitors of a regime who needed to be dealt with harshly in times of war. And that's led to the amount of pressure. And that's led to so much pressure that the team saluted and sung the anthem in their next 2 games. Their final game was against the Philippines on Sunday, and the team was scheduled to return to Iran on Monday. Now, obviously, political situations meant that's not so simple. You can't just hop on a flight from the Gold Coast to Tehran right now. But there's lots of fears about these girls' safety if they were to return to Tehran. So there's been discussions between the government, the AFC, FIFA, over the coming days, and on Monday evening, helped by the Australian Federal Police, five girls escaped really the team hotel and are currently being held in a police safe house.
For people listening to this story, they might have heard about what went on this week, but what background information can you give us about the Iranian women's national team and kind of the lead up to all of this?
There's always been a lot of pressure on Iranian sports teams as one of the most visible faces of a regime. Now, it's even worse for the women's team due to a lot of effectively repressive state apparatuses which are in play in them. As I was told by a former international, while, for example, the men's team can sort of be co-opted in a way through more sort of, I guess, smoothing things over, bribery, this makes life easier. It's almost active repression when it comes to the women's team. Players were asked to leave large guarantees of money back in Iran to ensure that they didn't claim asylum. Their families were threatened. These are the stakes which these girls are dealing with. Right now, amidst times of war, it's probably the only real public face of a regime on display right now internationally, and the stakes which now these girls are effectively dealing with are almost at quite terrifying proportion, to be quite honest, when you see that Iran is at war, and yet at the same time there's intelligence officers staying with the team. State TV is taking time out of their broadcasts to talk about what this team is doing.
Obviously, there's more to come on this story, but as a group of women and the team and the staff head back to Iran, and those 5 stay back at the safe house in Australia, what do you think in the immediate days life looks like for both sets of women?
It's a really good question. I think that if we start with a team if we start with a part of the team who are currently in the safe house, they were informed of all of their options by the Australian government and the federal police. There'll now be a sort of more formal process they have to work to about what exactly their refuge looks like, whether it's asylum, whether it's something more temporary. It's not much more uncertain. It's also uncertain what's happening with the rest of the team. So they're currently, under my understanding, at the same hotel they've been at throughout the tournament in the Gold Coast. Obviously, in some ways, that's only a temporary solution. They aren't able to get back to Tehran on a direct flight. There's been suggestions that their stay might be sort of extended indefinitely until some sort of resolution is reached, whether that's potentially more members of the team claiming asylum or the regime effectively managing to get them back to Tehran. There's been suggestions they may potentially take a route back, such as fly to Turkey and potentially travel overland from there. But as you stress, that these are sort of more uncertain. The team themselves don't know what it is. They're in a sort of limbo period right now.
Jacob, we'll continue to follow this story as you bring us more and more details. Thank you so much. And to keep you updated on what is happening on the pitch at the Women's Asian Cup, as of Monday morning, all group stage matches in Group A and Group B have now been completed. South Korea topped Group A on goal differential ahead of the hosts Australia. Those 2 teams played out a breathless 3-3 draw on Sunday. Over in Group B, China came out on top, 3 wins from 3 games, with North Korea picking up second place and advancing to the quarterfinals. Out of Group B, Uzbekistan also advancing to the quarterfinals as one of the 2 best third-place teams. So there you have it for the Women's Asian Cup. We'll have much more coming for you in the shows later this week. As always, thank you so very much for hanging out with us here on Full Time. Tell us, who was in your 23-player roster? Who did we miss? Who did we get right? Don't be mad at me. Like I said, I wasn't a part of it. It's all Tamerra and Melanie. Just kidding. I got off easy in this episode. Again, we'd love to hear from you. You can shoot us an email at fulltime@theathletic.com or DM on our social channels at TA Fulltime. Did you know The Athletic has partnered with Yahoo Sports to provide free, best-in-class coverage of women's sports? That's right. Go check out the Women's Sports Hub at sports.yahoo.com/women-sports. That does it for our show today. Thank you so very much for listening. I'm Jillian Sakovits, and a big thanks to these 3, our podcast producer, Theo Lloyd Hughes, who kept this chaos on track today, our podcast producer, Leah Griffin, and our executive producer, Emily Olson. We'll see you later this week.